So welcome to the webinar Blue Carbon for Dummies. We'll just give people a few minutes to enter the webinar. Okay. So welcome to this webinar, Blue Carbon for Dummies workshop. It's going to hopefully be an interesting webinar. We hope you learn a bit more about blue carbon. Today we have Stephen Lutz that will be presenting about the blue carbon, and we have Gro Slotsvik that will present a bit about blue forest. My name is Maria Delby, and I'm all journalists' best friend. We have one important guideline for this meeting, and that's please refrain from directly quoting what is said. And however, if one of us shares something you'd like to use, don't hesitate to get in touch with us afterwards. But this approach allowed us to engage in a more open and candid discussion with all of you today. Please use the Q&A box to ask your questions during the seminar. We will try to answer as many as possible. After the presentation, we will have 20 minutes for asking questions. You can raise your hand or you can write your question in the Q&A box. The main goal for us today is to give you, the journalists, a chance to get to know us and to know more about blue carbon. We have an event during the COP28 and wanted to give you a head start. We know that 1,000 other things are happening, so we are here to help you. Remember that all our resources are free to use. GRID-Arendal is a non-profit environmental communication center. Next slide. So this is just to show you a few of the many reports we have made and how we normally work. We work with UNEP, and all our reports and all the work we do are based on science. So you can trust that we give you good and valid information. When we work, we always work with partners. Our role is to make the environmental information Our partners include different UN agencies, governments, and others that wants to help the planet. We are working with the Sustainable Development Goals, and we're trying to fight the climate change. We try to turn knowledge and data into tools for a better future. Today we will start with Gro Slotsvik that will tell us a bit about Blue Forest.
Thank you. And as Maria says, my name is Gro Slotsvik and I'm a marine environment expert here at GRID-Arendal. And for this session, I'm here in my role as project manager for GRID-Arendal for the Norwegian Blue Forest Network, of which we are an organising member. And for those of you unfamiliar with the Norwegian Blue Forest Network and BFN, one of the aims of the network is to inspire ecosystem-based policymaking in Norway and beyond. And when we're talking about blue carbon, we are mostly talking about carbon that is sequestered and stored in blue forests or through blue forests. Blue carbon is also sequestered and stored in marine creatures, from shrimp to jellyfish to fish to whales. And when we talk today about blue carbon markets, you'll mainly be looking at blue forests. So in a second, I will share what blue forests are through the lens of NBFN. And while this video talks specifically about Norway, the research, the principles are applicable to blue forests worldwide. And just by way of a small example, our superstar kelp, which is one of the major blue carbon sinks, covers 1/3 of the world coastlines. So I'm going to go ahead and roll film.
Blue forests are a common name for vegetation in the ocean and tidal zones, such as kelp, rockweed, seagrass, salt marshes, and mangroves. Mangroves are trees and shrubs that grow in saline or brackish waters. They are found along tropical and subtropical coasts around the world. In Norway, kelp forests are the most widely distributed blue forest, followed by rockweed and seagrass. There is limited knowledge on the distribution of salt marshes in Norway, but they are likely found all along the Norwegian coast. Kelp species are large brown seaweeds that grow in rocky habitats in most temperate and polar coastal areas, where sunlight is accessible for photosynthesis. Tangle kelp and sugar kelp are by far the most common species in Norway. Like kelp, rockweed is also a brown seaweed. However, rockweed grows in the shallow intertidal zone and is usually smaller than kelp. They are typically visible from the shore. In Norway, all seagrass species belong to the eelgrass family, which grows on the soft seabed in sheltered bays. Salt marshes are coastal wetlands that are flooded and drained by tidal water. They are comprised of a variety of species that tolerate high salinities and appear to be very diverse. Overall, blue forests are marine and coastal habitats that constitute some of the most diverse ecosystems in the world.
Okay, and the next speaker today is Stephen Lutz, who are leading our blue carbon. So.
Hi, thank you. Stephen Lutz here, and I'm the blue carbon lead at GRID-Arendal. I've been working on blue carbon since 2008, when it was just, when it was actually even before it was called or termed blue carbon. And I'm very fortunate to be here working with GRID-Arendal and UNEP and other international partners to advance this natural solution in climate change. So what is blue carbon? Well, we heard a wee bit on it from the video, but essentially it's the carbon that is sequestered or stored by the oceans and coastal ecosystems. and coastal blue carbon in salt marsh, mangrove, and seagrass habitats is what many in the international community have focused on in terms of conservation and climate mitigation options. Actions to conserve and restore these ecosystems are being included in national pledges to meet the Paris Climate Agreement. Could you please go back 2 slides? Yeah, this slide, that's fine. Why are these habitats important for climate change? As you can see from the data presented in the graphic on the right, in comparison to terrestrial forests, coastal blue carbon habitats sequester or capture a lot of carbon. Sequestration is the annual uptake of carbon into biomass and soils. The graphic on the left illustrates the majority of this carbon is stored in the soil, and much more than terrestrial forests. So blue carbon ecosystems are nature's true carbon powerhouses. Next slide. However, coastal habitats are some of the most threatened ecosystems in the world. Worldwide, we are losing these habitats rapidly at rates ranging from 0.7 to 7 of their global coverage each year. And when we destroy these ecosystems, they go from being impressive natural carbon sinks to becoming very large sources. So the carbon that's stored in these ecosystems then gets released into the atmosphere, which is bad. Also, when they are degraded, the many other important benefits that they provide us are impacted. Blue carbon habitats are important for fish, shellfish, turtles, birds, and many other important species. They also provide awesome opportunities for recreation. And they're important for protecting the coastlines from storms and flooding. The blue carbon market follows the development of terrestrial forestry carbon projects. In these projects, the carbon that is saved from planting trees and conserving forests is measured, certified, and sold as carbon offsets on the carbon market. These offsets are purchased by companies who want to offset their carbon emissions. For example, just this year, GRID-Arendal offset its carbon emissions from our flights with carbon offsets from a community-based mangrove carbon project, one that I'll get into in a wee bit. The market provides great financial incentive to reduce forest emissions and enhanced forest carbon stocks. However, the market is not our get-out-of-jail-free card, and we still need to reduce carbon emissions. The market is a tool for speeding up climate action and to help meet the Paris Climate Agreement. Since the last UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow in late 2021, the price per ton of nature-based carbon offsets has dramatically increased. And this has gone from less than $8 per ton to just under $16 per ton in 4 months in 2021. So there was a skyrocketing. This is also still increasing. Along with this increase, there's been an also almost exponential interest from carbon market forces and those that would like to invest in blue carbon projects. They have found that the available supply of projects is scarce and certainly does not meet the demand. And that demand is high. By 2050, carbon offsets are expected to be up to a $550 billion market globally. Because of the valuable benefits that are associated with coastal blue carbon ecosystems in terms of climate, communities, and biodiversities, blue carbon offsets are seen as high value and are in high demand. And the value or the importance of blue carbon has been advertised very well. Okay, good. Earlier this year, The Guardian reported on some research calling into question the integrity of forestry carbon market projects. The researchers found that many forestry carbon offsets have problems with their certification, leading to their climate change claims being worthless. Obviously, that's a big deal because carbon really has to be sequestered for the carbon market to be a real part of the solution to climate change. Next slide. Okay, and just a week ago, Channel 4 UK also reported on fraudulent forest carbon projects, including allegations of human rights abuses on indigenous populations, i.e. communities potentially being exploited. This is not a good thing. Okay. However, From experience with the United Nations Environment Programme, we know that community-based blue carbon projects can work. The carbon finance and benefit sharing from such projects can have great community impact. One such project is Nikoko Pamoja in Kenya. It is a small-scale blue carbon project encompassing only around about 117 hectares. The communities associated with this project undertake mangrove conservation and planting activities. And the revenue or profit from the project is allocated by the communities, by community associations. And it has supported the creation of 3 freshwater wells for 3 villages in Kenya, providing sustainable safe water to the community. It also has provided school books for local children, hospital equipment, and other community positive activities. And last year, this project realized their highest price point of over $20 per ton, which was well over the average of nature-based carbon offsets for that year. The blue carbon projects in Kenya are working, and the government is exploring how to replicate them along the coast. And in fact, the international community is exploring how to replicate them globally. Next slide. So what is being sold? Well, these projects advertise their product, which is a carbon offset, as having carbon, community, and biodiversity benefits. And it's because of these benefits that these projects can command such a high price of ton on the market. Some of these projects globally have been reported to sell their offsets for up to $40 per ton. And that's really far up there. Okay. Next slide. So you may ask, how does this actually work? What are the finances and are there models that can serve as examples to follow or learn from? Okay, basically, what's going on here? Well, for Kenya, for the Kenyan projects, at least 60% of the revenue from the carbon market is mandated for community benefit. And this includes the mangrove work teams and the community benefit activities. And that is because these projects use the Plan Vivo standard for certifying their carbon offsets. And this Plan Vivo standard, just like the Vera standard, is a mechanism that allows these projects to sell carbon on the international market. It certifies them, okay? For these projects, the government did not take a percentage of the revenue, and the project costs are less than project income. So in other words, these projects can receive profit. Because of this profit or revenue, the local communities are obviously very supportive of these projects and they're working. And that's why the government wants to replicate them. Excellent. Okay. However, it's not all roses. So for example, in Senegal, in the late 2010s, in the very early days of blue carbon, a large-scale mangrove restoration and carbon insetting project was set up. This is where carbon offsets are used by a small group of companies to offset their emissions rather than traded on the voluntary carbon market. This project was billed as the largest mangrove restoration project in the world at the time. And 10 years on, the social and environmental impacts of the project were reported on. And if you read that report, you see extremely glowing remarks of the project and its positive impacts. However, one thing that is not apparently reported on this independent review are the criticisms of this project, which were published in peer-reviewed scientific journals. They include that women and other community members may have received meager pay for their work, were not informed about who would benefit, and lost access to their natural resources. So, ultimately, any project will have some type of socioeconomic impact to a community. And this slide illustrates some research from indigenous communities in Fiji. And what it's showing here is that women disproportionately use and benefit from coastal marine ecosystems. So the application of a blue carbon market project is going to change the value of these activities potentially, okay? So it means that these projects could have socioeconomic impacts and change the roles of who's working on these ecosystems. They may reinforce existing gender inequalities. They may redefine women and men's roles and relations within these communities. So it's So we definitely have to look at these projects and understand that there will be some types of impacts. Right now in Madagascar, the blue carbon work teams that we've been working with are all women. In Kenya, it's mixed, men and women. So ultimately, the blue carbon market is rapidly developing. Projects are being expanded and developed at a very rapid pace. Right now, sort of the market is a sort of a Wild West landscape. There are many challenges facing those who want to invest in projects, including especially for communities and governments. Governments are responsible for looking at the risks that the market may result in to their communities that they're responsible for. The concept of blue carbon essentially matches saving mangroves and other coastal ecosystems as saving the planet in terms of mitigating climate change. I think we can all agree that that's a very good thing. However, it has become rapidly apparent that blue carbon is no longer just a concept in conservation. It's a financial transaction, market commodity. And through that market, according to the structure of a project, communities or other parties can benefit from blue carbon revenue. Lack of transparency and lack of information are also significant challenges facing the blue carbon market. Okay. However, many carbon offset buyers, those that purchase these carbon offsets, want a high quality product. Obviously, that was a major consideration for when we purchased our carbon offsets from the blue carbon projects. Okay. We want to make sure that these offsets mitigate climate change and also have large community benefit. Microsoft also is another company that's been purchasing blue carbon offsets, and they have guidance on what is high quality carbon offsets. And this includes looking at things like what are the harms and the benefits illustrated from these types of projects, the projects that should be invested in, and how is environmental justice? Should environmental justice be a priority for investment? Okay, and I think this approach could be explored quite a bit more with regarding developing standards or guidance for projects on the voluntary carbon market. Next slide. It is clear that multiple types of blue carbon projects already exist on the market. And from these multiple types of projects, you can probably surmise that multiple different types of blue carbon offset or different values that go into these blue carbon offsets are out there. However, from our experience, we already know what high integrity carbon offsets are. They actually deliver on carbon communities and biodiversity. Governance of the market is the role of governments, and we need additional information and expertise in order to navigate this new field. This image is from the Vanga Bay Community Association in Kenya. That's one of the projects that we've set up with support from the United Nations Environment Programme. Right on the wall in this community association for everyone to see are all the finances from the selling of blue carbon offsets. Every Kenyan shilling is accounted for here. Okay? This full transparency and the revenue means that the communities in Vanga Bay are the #1 supporters of the project. So the question that arises from here that we can pose to other blue carbon projects or other projects that want to get started is that if coastal villages in Kenya can make the blue carbon market work for themselves and demonstrate this level of financial transparency, then why not other blue carbon projects? Before blue carbon market projects proliferate, let's learn the lessons from forestry carbon projects and understand how these projects can measurably and verifiably deliver on the benefits that they are promising. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Remember that you can ask questions.
So Desiree has a question.
You can either raise your hands or you can write in the Q&A. We'll be waiting for the journalists to ask questions. I have a question for you, Stephen.
Sure.
So how can blue carbon help solve the climate crisis?
Well, I think it's not going to be the ultimate solution. Obviously, we need to reduce emissions as soon as possible and make meaningful reductions there. But it's part of the solution. It's just a nature-based part of the solution to climate change, because these ecosystems store and sequester a lot of carbon per hectare. So they're even though they exist on the fringes of our coasts, they are actually very valuable for climate change mitigation. And the idea here is that if we can recognize these values, there'll be more voices to protect these ecosystems, because when they are degraded, they release that carbon into the atmosphere. So they're part of the ills of climate change, not the solutions.
We have a question from Desiree. I think you can ask the question in a few seconds.
Hand is raised. Asked to unmute. You can ask your question now.
Maybe they could put it into the chat.
If your microphone's not working, please put it into the chat.
Okay. There's always some technical issues when you do these online webinars, but and we can't hear anything here. But if you can write your question in the Q&A box, we'll try to answer. But Stephen, maybe you have some good ideas in what kind of stories you think journalists should focus on when we're talking about the blue carbon.
Sure. So one thing to look for here is, sort of look under the hood when you look at blue carbon projects. Obviously, blue carbon is a great nature-based solution to climate change, but the questions that you should or look out for is one of them. If you care about environmental justice or social justice, then explore who actually benefits from these projects. Is it a coastal villager, or is it let's just say a fat cat in the city, or is it somebody in the north who's actually benefiting from these projects? It would be good to understand that sort of that financial landscape. Obviously, blue carbon projects, you need investment, so you need money. So what's a fair return on your investment? What should an investor actually fairly get? And I think those types of questions definitely should be looked at and explored. The Guardian article explored the integrity of the actual carbon value, but there are these other values that and impacts that these projects could have. So I would definitely look at that.
And you mentioned some projects that we have been involved in, or you have been involved in, but do you have other examples of how you can do this or scale it up or do good blue market projects, blue carbon market projects? So.
Well, I think right now there's a large push on setting up as many projects as possible and setting up the largest projects as possible. So obviously the investors, and if you want to offset a large amount of carbon, you need a large project. But one focus could be within the international community could be setting up the appropriate governance of this market so that we actually have real carbon emissions, real community benefit, and real biodiversity benefit that's measured. So the ultimate idea here is that what we want to do is look at what's happened to forestry carbon, look at what's happening in coastal blue carbon, and then try to avoid getting Channel 4 UK exposés and Guardian articles coming out in a few years highlighting bad impacts from blue carbon projects. I think the time is now to assess what's going on and to chart a pathway forward for real to make sure that we don't have those negative impacts.
Mm-hmm. And then I can see that we have a question in the Q&A box, and it's maybe a bit related, but it touched into a very interesting debate that are going on, at least here in Norway, and it's about the impact that the mining of the sea ground can have on this blue carbon area. And at least I'm linking it to this because that's what our webinar is on.
Yeah.
Is about today. So
Sure.
do you think that is there any connection between mining the sea ground and blue carbon?
Well, it really depends. I think, I think that is an area of research that is ongoing right now, and it's a very new area of research, is looking at blue carbon sediments. There was a paper that came out a few years ago saying that this was extremely significant. That has been called into question. The idea here is we have to realize, what happens to deep sea sediments? Yes, that's where carbon is stored, but when these deep sea sediments get disturbed, does the carbon then get released back into the atmosphere? It's already in the marine environment. Where does it go? Okay. Obviously, deep sea mining may have a lot of negative impacts, but I don't think we understand fully if it has the carbon impacts yet or not. Like I said, there has been papers saying that bottom trawling does have that, but maybe that's more for shallower bottom trawling than deep sea bottom trawling or deep sea mining. But don't quote me on that yet because the research isn't out yet.
Okay. And then there's another question. Investor, how can you assure that there will be investment, social benefit, biodiversity, monitoring and reporting has often been criticized in terrestrial forest?
Okay, so I would say, if you're going to look at these projects and you want to invest, and we actually have been approached by groups that are looking at this question right now. And one thing we're doing, if I'm going to advertise ourselves a little bit, is we're actually going to be producing a new Blue Carbon 2 report, which is actually going to have some of that guidance for what exactly blue carbon is.
We can hear it. Is it right now?
Okay, could I just answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. There's right now for blue carbon projects, you have two standards. You have the Vera standard, and that's the one that's received a lot of criticism. And then you have the Plan Vivo standard. That's more small scale, but I'd say it's less risk if you're focused on doing community-based projects. So you have to sort of educate yourself as a buyer. There is some guidance out there. So there's principles and guidance on developing blue carbon market projects. So I think that's something that we should be sharing information on. Thank you.
And as a follow-up question to that, I can ask you, how can stakeholders, like including government and NGOs, collaborate to strengthen the integrity of the blue carbon market?
Well, we actually have a project that we're doing that on right now, and that's the project between the governments of Norway and Indonesia, where we're going to be running a series of technical workshops and other activities to help increase awareness of what high integrity is and the mechanisms that are needed so that governments can regulate these projects or govern these projects in a way that they make sure that as much maximal benefit goes to the communities or whatever they have as their goals of these projects. The projects that we set up in Kenya, 60% of the revenue is going towards the communities, and that's a big important deal for those communities. In other parts of Kenya, the government's now exploring, okay, what sort of a benefit sharing system should we have? Some countries, they talk about potentially 25% going to the community. Kenya, they have been discussing 50%. And some other projects on the carbon market, you have as low as 5% going towards communities. So I think if we share more information on what's actually going on in these markets, then you're going to have a more educated way to decide what project you should say yes to or no to, as far as an investor or a government or a community.
But do you have a recommendation on that? Is there like a standard that you think we should aim for, or is it too difficult to say right now?
I think UN GRID is doing some really good work in this area. But if I was going to personally recommend somebody to buy a blue carbon offset, I would tell them to go through Plan Vivo at the moment.
Should we try and listen to question from the audience again.
Yeah.
They came in and then they disappeared. Hi, Desiree.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi there, thank
Good
you.
afternoon. It's afternoon. It's afternoon here. Can you hear me?
Welcome.
Yes, we can hear you.
We
Please
can
go
hear
ahead.
now.
Okay. So in a community where you have a poor refuse management and your pollution, which has farmlands, and being a person or just maybe a group, how do you think we could drive home our concerns to see that people change their habits from indiscriminate refuse dumping, which is also affecting us so much here in Africa? And it's even tending to poverty because our farm produce, we've noticed that the community women are complaining that they can hardly get yields as it used to be. And so training their children is also a major challenge. What's your advice? How do we engage with government or partner non-governmental organizations to see how we could be aided to come up and live and enjoy clean air? I think we all deserve to enjoy clean or healthy air. So that's one of the questions I have now to ask.
Yeah, thank you. In response, I think there's a lot of environmental literacy projects that are out there that are looking at addressing the plastic pollution. For plastic pollution in blue forest ecosystems, obviously that potentially degrades some of the services that these ecosystems provide. So it may be that blue carbon could help with, actually, you know what? It's not maybe, but the projects in Kenya actually have supported community cleanups of mangrove ecosystems through the carbon market. So there is a financial incentive, and as we know, financial incentives are probably the most important incentives for stimulating action within communities. With regard to setting up blue carbon projects, there's not a lot of guidance out there, sad to say, and I hope we can develop more guidance. I would again say go to the Plan Vivo website. You have to develop a community association. So there has to be some type of an organization that legally represents a community. And that's a starting point. And then I would engage with the local community. Have they heard about blue carbon? If not, then do a little research and start putting that project together.
Thank you, Stephen. I have one more question. In your opinion, what are the future prospects and potential improvements for the blue carbon market in marine conservation and climate change mitigation?
I think looking forward, I think it would be great if we could actually, make sure that we don't follow the ills that the forestry carbon that are being reported from forestry carbon, where you actually have fraudulent practices and potentially fraudulent projects being certified and continuing to be sold as offsets. So we really need to look at what's happened on forestry carbon and make sure that we have a rigorous standard or rigorous guidelines that can be followed by communities or governments to make sure that we don't have that negative or that fraudulent practices. Also, it would be great if we could actually measure community benefit and biodiversity benefit in a more transparent and in a way that we can compare from one project to the next. A lot of the reporting on these projects in the voluntary carbon market right now is done by narrative reporting. And what I'm talking about there is it's just a narrative description of these other benefits like community benefit or biodiversity benefit. And that can change from one project to the next. So it's really difficult for governments to really understand if these projects are having this benefit, if the market represents narrative benefit. And let's say the narrative benefit is described in a way where it's describing only the positive aspects or overemphasizing the positive aspects. It's more like these projects are described as an advertisement brochure, as opposed to collecting information that can be used to manage the market. So that would be, I think, one of the ways forward, is to make sure that we're collecting verifiable and accountable information on these projects, that we're looking at the risks, that we're understanding what the real risks of the market is, understanding how governments can basically manage these projects, and to mitigate the risks for communities as well.
Thank you, Stephen. We have one more question. Had to join late, so apologize if this has already been addressed. Is there a way to make blue carbon projects attractive to buyers without the promise of offsets? Can we make these schemes work without allowing offsets?
Well, in a point, I'll say that's going to be tricky, because for the market to function, you need a carbon offset. Now, there are other, these ecosystems are, obviously, important ecosystems, and have been the focus of many conservation efforts. But what we're specifically talking about is the market. So for that to work, you need an offset. It may be that there's other financial schemes out there that you can incentivize conservation and restoration activities. But for what we're talking about right now, the market, you need an offset.
Thanks. And we still have some time. If it doesn't matter that you came in late, you can still ask your questions. I can keep asking Stephen questions, but I can always talk to him here at work. So I think it's better if the journalists out there ask the questions. But Stephen, I would like you to just tell us a bit about your event at the COP28. What is happening, and what are you doing, and why are you going, and is it relevant for journalists to join?
Yeah, sure. So myself and a colleague from our communications department will be attending the COP in Dubai, and we are managing a side event on the blue carbon market, blue carbon market integrity, on the 2nd of December at the UNEP Pavilion at 1:30 in the afternoon. And so if you have access to the Blue Zone, we'd love to see you there. And what we're doing is basically trying to understand what blue carbon high integrity could look like. So we have some government representatives and some expert speakers, and we're going to sort of dive deep into that a little bit. During the COP, we're also going to be conducting interviews, video interviews with delegates to basically ask that question. And these types of dialogues at the COP, they will go into the next iteration of the blue carbon report that we'll be producing next year, which hopefully will give a lot more guidance to countries and stakeholders and project developers on what high integrity could be for these carbon market projects.
And just because we do say that this is a webinar for the dummies, could you tell us what you mean when you say high integrity?
Well, high integrity is, I think what we've sort of got at is, a lot of people are talking about high quality and high integrity, but frankly, if you can't measure it, does it really exist? I think we know our projects in Kenya can be called high integrity and high quality because the communities are benefiting greatly and they seem very positive to those projects. But how do we make sure that that carbon offset is the same thing as other carbon offsets that are on the market right now? Obviously, if there's a carbon offset that a forestry carbon project that has been called fraudulent is selling, and then another project that is doing a better job, obviously they're not the same thing. So we have to understand what high integrity is, but I think we also have to actually measure it, not just call it high integrity, but to actually measure it.
Do we have some more questions or? Yeah, no? Okay. Okay, but thank you so much for your interesting lecture about blue carbon, Stephen. And for all you journalists out there, if you want to write about this, you can, in 1 second, our emails and names will appear on the screen. And then you know that you can reach out to us and ask questions. And you can also visit our webpage where you can use, you can use all our, if you can just go back to the, sorry, Rob. Just wanted to say that you can always write both me or Stephen or Gro if you have some questions, and you can also go to our webpage where we have pictures, infographics, reports, whatever, and it's all free of use. And then the next slide is a small survey. We would love you to answer a few questions. This is actually the second time that we do this kind of webinar for journalists. And we'd like to get some feedback on this. This is helpful. Are we doing it on a level where you understand it and can follow the discussion, or do you have inputs on how we can improve? Then we would be really grateful. So I'll just leave this a few seconds on the screen. And then we hope that those of you that goes to the COP will come and visit us, and else just reach out. We're here to help you make better stories about the environment. Thank you.